The Apache women wanted a child from him, but the shy rancher was speechless. The rancher had always been a quiet man. His small homestead sat on the edge of the vast sun-baked plains, where the wind carried dust and the scent of wild sage. He had inherited the land from his father, who had passed away when he was still a boy, leaving him with only the modest ranch, a few cattle, and a weathered cabin that had seen better days. Life was never easy here. The work was endless, and the loneliness could sometimes feel like a living presence. But the rancher preferred it that way. People in the nearby town often said he was shy, even timid. They didn't know him. They didn't see the quiet strength that guided every careful decision he made. Every morning he would rise with the sun, the cold air biting his face as he stepped onto the porch to greet the new day. The smell of hay, horses, and the dusty soil filled his lungs. His routine was simple but strict. First, he would feed the cattle, checking each animal for signs of sickness or injury. Then he would repair fences, mend broken tools, or cut firewood for the coming night. The work was hard, but it kept his mind occupied and his hands busy. He didn't need conversation to feel alive. The rhythm of labor was enough. Despite his quiet life, he had a reputation in the area. It was not built on wealth, flashy deeds, or heroics. No, his reputation was rooted in his fairness and honesty. When neighbors had disputes, they sometimes came to him, not because he liked to be involved, but because they trusted him to speak truthfully. He never took sides out of favoritism. He was simply a man who did what he thought was right, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. Some admired this, but others whispered that he was too cautious, too withdrawn, too careful. Yet the rancher did not care for opinions. Beyond the borders of his land lived the Apache people, who had watched him from a distance. Over the years, he had learned some of their ways. He knew the trails where deer often wandered, the water holes that appeared only in certain seasons, and the subtle signs of danger in the wind or the sky. He respected their knowledge because he had no choice but to. Nature on these plains was unforgiving, and survival depended on attention and humility. The Apache, in turn, noticed his quiet strength. He didn't hunt recklessly, didn't take more than he needed, and treated their shared land with care. Respect, though unspoken, grew slowly between him and the community. One spring, the rains failed. For weeks, the sky remained a pale, empty blue. Grass withered under the sun, and the waterholes shrank to shallow pools. The Apache people, who had long depended on these lands for food and water, began to struggle. Their horses grew thin, and the children's laughter turned quieter, replaced by whispered concerns. Even the elders, who had weathered many hardships, looked to the horizon with worry. It was during this time that the rancher's path crossed more closely with theirs. One morning, while checking a distant waterhole for his cattle, he spotted movement. At first he thought it might be a wild animal, but as he drew closer, he saw two women, clearly struggling, resting under the shade of a lone mesquite tree. One held a cloth to her arm, and the other's leg appeared swollen and bruised. They had clearly been traveling for days, perhaps even weeks, in search of water or food. Without thinking twice, the rancher approached them slowly, not wanting to startle them. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. The women froze, their eyes wary. They had seen many settlers, some kind and some cruel. It took a moment, but finally, they nodded. The rancher dismounted, offering water from a leather canteen. He did not ask for their names immediately, nor did he demand explanation. Survival, in that moment, mattered more than words. He helped them tend to their wounds with basic supplies he always kept on hand: clean cloths, herbs for swelling, and water to wash the dust and blood from cuts. The older woman, who had been silent most of the time, watched him carefully as if trying to read his intentions. The younger one seemed relieved but cautious, still unsure whether this man was a friend or a danger. By the end of the morning, their immediate pain was soothed, and they could walk with less difficulty. The rancher insisted they come to his cabin. At first, they refused, glancing at each other nervously. The idea of spending time inside the home of a stranger, a settler, was not one they took lightly. Yet, the sun climbed higher, the wind turned harsher, and the younger woman's ankle was clearly not strong enough for another mile of travel. With a subtle gesture from the elder, they agreed. Inside the cabin, he offered them food he had stored: dried meat, cornmeal, and fresh water. He did not try to impress them. There were no lavish spreads or unnecessary words. Yet in that quiet, humble space, the women felt something they had not expected: safety. Over the course of the day, the rancher learned small things. The elder woman spoke little, but her eyes carried stories of hardship and resilience. The younger one, though timid, revealed a quiet humor, laughing softly when the rancher struggled to cook a simple meal. Word of his kindness did not spread quickly. The rancher never sought recognition. He did not boast, did not tell neighbors, and certainly did not expect gratitude. Yet the Apache women noticed the difference between him and others. He did not look at them as property or as burdens. He treated them as human beings in need, nothing more and nothing less. By evening, when the sun dipped low, painting the plains in fiery orange and red, the women prepared to leave. The elder gave him a slight bow, a gesture of respect and silent thanks, and the younger woman offered a small, shy smile. "Will you be all right?" the rancher asked. It was unusual for him to voice concern beyond the immediate need, but something in this moment urged him to ask. The elder woman nodded. "You are strong. You care. That is enough," she said softly, her words measured but heavy with meaning. The younger woman simply held his gaze for a moment before turning to follow her elder, a quiet trust forming in that glance. After they left, the rancher stood outside his cabin, watching the fading trail of dust that marked their departure. The plains felt emptier somehow, yet also more alive. Something had shifted, though he did not yet understand what. He returned to his cattle, to his work, and to the rhythm of his life, but the encounter lingered. He could not shake the feeling that his life had subtly changed, that the quiet routine he had cherished might now carry a weight he had never anticipated. For the first time in years, he wondered about the people beyond his land, not in fear nor in curiosity, but in a quiet, tentative connection. The Apache women had reminded him that kindness, even in silence and simplicity, had consequences that reached far beyond what he could see. He had acted out of habit, out of decency, and yet it had left a mark on lives other than his own. The thought was both humbling and unsettling. That night, as the wind rattled the cabin windows and the moon cast pale light across the plains, he sat outside, a cup of water in his hand, reflecting. The world felt larger, more complex, and yet, in the simplicity of his actions, he found a small satisfaction. He had done what he could. The rest was not his to control, and yet a quiet hope took root in his chest, a hope that perhaps in a place so harsh and unforgiving, moments of goodness could grow and shape the future in ways he might never know. Little did he realize that this moment of quiet kindness would be the beginning of a far greater story, one that would challenge his shy nature, his sense of boundaries, and his understanding of family and duty. The Apache women he had helped were not merely travelers passing through his life. They were the first threads in a connection that would test him in ways he could never have imagined. And for now, as he returned to his bed that night, the plains seemed just a little less lonely, and his heart just a little more open to the world around him. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. The rancher had already been awake for hours, performing his usual tasks, feeding the cattle, checking fences, and tending to the small vegetable garden he kept near the cabin. Yet, despite the routine, his mind was not fully on work. Thoughts of the two Apache women kept returning, especially the younger one, with the shy, careful eyes. He wondered if they had made it safely back to their people, and whether the elder woman's words about strength and care carried some deeper meaning he had not fully understood. He could not know that his concern had been noticed. Word traveled quietly through the Apache camp, carried by the soft voices of those who had observed his actions. The elder woman, who had long memories and watched the behavior of outsiders carefully, discussed him among themselves. "He is different," one said, her voice low, carrying the authority of experience. "Not like the others. He does not take. He does not boast. He gives what is needed." The younger woman, who had leaned on her elder during their journey, listened intently. She remembered the way he had looked at her, not with judgment, not with desire, not with suspicion, but with respect. She remembered how he had treated her ankle gently, not like it was a burden, but like it was something important to protect. These small gestures, simple yet sincere, had left a mark in her mind. She had never seen a settler act like this, and she could not stop thinking about it. Several days passed quietly on the ranch. The land, still parched from the failed rains, tested his skills and patience. Yet he kept to his work, unaware that the Apache women were planning to return. They came not in anger or demand, but in careful thought. They wished to speak to him again, to make a request that weighed heavily on their hearts. The elder woman knew it would be a challenge. The rancher was shy and cautious, and the matter they wished to discuss was delicate. On the third morning, as he repaired a broken fence along the northern edge of his land, he noticed movement in the distance. A cloud of dust rose over the trail, and he immediately recognized the figures. The two women approached cautiously, moving slowly to avoid alarming him. He stepped back, letting them come closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You have returned," he said quietly, almost to himself. The elder woman nodded. "We have something to ask," she said. Her tone was steady but serious. The younger woman remained slightly behind, her eyes fixed on the ground. The rancher's heart skipped a beat. He had not expected this visit, and the weight of anticipation settled over him like the heat of the sun at midday. He could not guess what was coming. The elder woman explained carefully, choosing her words as one would handle fragile glass. "Our people face difficulties," she said. "There are few healthy men to ensure the future. We see that you are strong, honest, and careful. You care for life. For these reasons, we ask you to help our community, to give a child who will grow among us." The rancher froze. His hands, which had been gripping the fence post, loosened slightly. He stared at them, speechless, struggling to understand. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and serious. He had always known life could be difficult on these plains. He had understood responsibility, work, and survival. But this request, so direct, so personal, left him unsure how to respond. The younger woman shifted nervously, glancing at him with wide eyes. She could see the confusion and hesitation etched into his face. "We do not wish to force you," the elder woman added, sensing the weight of the moment. "We ask because we trust you, because we see your heart." "But your answer must be your own." For several moments, no one spoke. the rancher felt a swirl of emotions: surprise, doubt, fear, and a strange sense of honor. He had never been asked to do something so significant, so life-altering. He was not a man accustomed to making decisions for others beyond the immediate needs of work and survival. And yet, he understood that this was not a demand, but a plea, a request, based on respect and trust. The rancher took a deep breath. I do not know what to say," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. His shyness, which had always kept him quiet in town and around strangers, now seemed both a burden and a shield. He wanted to act rightly, to honor their trust, but the path forward was unclear. The elder woman smiled faintly, not with mockery, but with understanding. "We did not expect you to answer immediately," she said. "We only wish to speak honestly, to let you know our need. Think carefully. Your heart will guide you." He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of their gaze upon him. They did not leave immediately. Instead, they set up a small camp near his land for a few days, enough to continue discussions and allow him time to consider. During this period, he learned more about them and their people. They told stories of their lives, their struggles, and their traditions. They spoke of survival in harsh lands, of children who carried the hopes of generations, and of the respect owed to those who acted with honesty and care. The rancher listened. He had never heard such stories so openly shared with him before. Each tale, each small detail was like a thread weaving into his understanding of their world. He realized that this request was not about desire or control. It was about community, survival, and trust. The more he listened, the more he felt a sense of responsibility, though it was still tinged with hesitation. Yet, he also felt fear. The decision was enormous. It was not something he could undo, and it would change relationships, lives, and perhaps even the future of the people he had only just come to know. He wondered if he was capable of fulfilling such a responsibility, if he could meet the expectations without harming anyone or causing regret. These thoughts kept him awake at night, staring at the stars through the cabin window, wondering what the right choice would be. The younger woman observed him closely during these days, noticing his thoughtfulness, his gentle manner, and the care he showed not just to them, but to his land and animals. She began to see his hesitation not as weakness, but as honesty, a reflection of his deep consideration for the lives of others. He was not a man to act rashly or selfishly, and this made her trust him even more. Finally, after several days of quiet reflection, he approached them one evening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the plains and painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. I will consider your request," he said slowly, choosing each word with care. "I do not yet know if I can do what you ask, but I promise to think honestly and act with respect." The elder woman nodded. "That is all we ask. Your honesty is more valuable than any immediate answer." The younger woman smiled faintly, relief softening her features. Though the weight of the request remained, a bond had formed through patience, understanding, and shared respect. That night, as the rancher returned to his cabin, he felt the first stirrings of a change within himself. He realized that life on the plains, which had always been about solitude and routine, might now include something far greater: connection, trust, and the chance to affect the future of a community. He could not yet say how the story would unfold, but for the first time he felt the heavy burden of responsibility mingled with a quiet sense of purpose. The days passed slowly after that. The women remained nearby, visiting occasionally to check on his land and the health of his cattle. He spoke little but listened more than ever, learning not just about survival but about the values and hopes of a people whose lives were tied intimately to the land he shared. With each day, he grew more aware of the trust placed in him and the importance of careful thought before any decision. Though he remained shy and reserved, the rancher began to understand that courage did not always come from action alone. Sometimes courage came from listening, reflecting, and honoring the lives of others through thoughtful consideration. And in that realization, the first true connection formed between him and the Apache women, a connection that would shape the days and years to come in ways he could not yet imagine. Days turned into weeks, and the rancher found himself thinking more and more about the Apache women. Their visit had changed something within him, though he struggled to put it into words. Life on the plains had always been predictable, guided by routines and work, but now his mind often wandered beyond fences, cattle, and the cabin. He began to think of responsibility in a new way, not just toward his land or animals, but toward people whose lives were intertwined with the land he cared for. The women, for their part, continued their visits, always cautious, never overstepping boundaries. The elder woman spoke with him occasionally, sharing wisdom about the seasons, the land, and the importance of family and community. The younger woman observed quietly, her presence gentle, patient, and watchful. She did not push him or demand answers. Instead, she shared small moments, watching the sunset, tending a garden with him, or laughing softly at his awkward attempts to cook a simple meal over an open fire. Each interaction built trust, even as the weight of the request lingered in the air, unspoken but understood. The rancher could not deny that he was beginning to feel a strange connection with them. It was not love, at least not in the way he had heard others describe it. It was something quieter, deeper, a respect and care that grew with every shared day. He noticed the way the younger woman's hand would brush against the fence post when she helped, or how her gaze lingered on the land as if she were imagining a future that he had never considered. It unsettled him, yet it also inspired a strange warmth within his cautious heart. One afternoon, as he worked repairing a broken water trough, the elder woman approached him with a serious look on her face. "You are thinking too much," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "Thinking is good, but action must also be guided by honesty and respect. You cannot decide lightly, but you must decide with care. Your hesitation shows your heart is not selfish.
That is rare.
That is valuable." He nodded, unsure how to respond. Words often failed him, especially when matters were important. He had always been a man of actions, not speeches, and yet this situation required thought and reflection, unlike anything he had faced before. He wondered what kind of person he would be if he agreed to help, and what kind of responsibility that would place on his shoulders. The younger woman approached, carrying a small basket of fresh herbs. She did not speak at first, only handed him the basket and smiled faintly. He took it, noticing the care she had taken in gathering and arranging the herbs. "Thank you," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before looking away. That small exchange, silent yet full of meaning, reminded him of the trust that had already begun to form between them. Despite the growing connection, fear still lingered. He spent nights awake, staring at the stars through the window of his cabin, imagining the consequences of his choices. What if he failed? What if he hurt them, or the child, or himself? What if he was not the man they believed him to be? These questions haunted him, yet he could not turn away from the responsibility. He knew that ignoring the request would be easier, but easier was not always right. One evening, a sudden storm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and the wind began to whip through the tall grass. Rain poured down in sheets, and lightning lit up the sky in bright flashes. The rancher rushed to secure his livestock and repair broken fences, knowing that a storm could cause chaos in minutes. As he worked, he realized the women had not returned to their camp for shelter. Concern gripped him, and he mounted his horse to ride across the wet fields to find them. He found them huddled under the sparse roof of an abandoned shed, their clothes soaked and their faces pale from cold and fear. Without hesitation, he led them back to his cabin, offering blankets and a warm fire. That night, as the storm raged outside, the three of them sat in silence, listening to the rain patter against the roof. It was a quiet moment, yet it spoke volumes. The rancher understood that trust was not built in grand gestures, but in small acts of care and protection, especially when danger threatened. Over the next few days, the storm left the plains muddy and treacherous. Travel was difficult, and the women stayed close to his cabin. During this time, conversations deepened. They spoke of family, of traditions, and of the importance of children and the continuation of their people. The elder woman explained that they sought someone with integrity and respect because the child would carry not just life, but the values of the community. The younger woman shared her hopes for a future in which their people could thrive despite hardships. The rancher listened carefully. He realized that the request was not simply about having a child. It was about trust, legacy, and the continuation of values that mattered deeply. It was about more than biology. It was about the care, guidance, and protection he could offer. The weight of this understanding was heavy, but it also clarified his thinking. He began to see that this was not a demand or a manipulation, but a sacred responsibility. Despite his growing understanding, hesitation remained. The rancher was naturally cautious. He feared misunderstanding, conflict, and the potential for mistakes. Yet he also felt a sense of duty that he could not ignore. He began to imagine a future in which his quiet life could have meaning beyond his land and work. He wondered if he could rise to the challenge, if he could act with the respect and care that the women had already recognized in him. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the plains, the rancher took a walk alone. He followed the trail that led toward the edge of the Apache camp, though he did not go inside. He stopped near a small creek and knelt by the water, looking at his reflection. For the first time, he thought about himself not just as a solitary man, but as someone capable of responsibility toward others. He considered the weight of the request, the trust placed in him, and the lives that could be shaped by his decision. He returned to the cabin with a sense of quiet determination. He had not made a final choice, but he had reached a point where avoidance was no longer possible. The women sensed the change in him as well.
The elder woman spoke gently. "You have thought carefully. That is good."
The heart of a man is measured by his care, not by his words alone. We will wait, as you decide. The younger woman's presence was quieter, yet equally powerful. She offered small acts of kindness, bringing water, helping with chores, and speaking only when necessary. These gestures reminded him of the humanity at the center of the request. They reminded him that this was not about obligation or pressure, but about shared trust, respect, and understanding. Days passed, and the rancher began to feel a subtle change within himself. His shyness remained, but it was softened by a growing sense of courage and responsibility. He realized that sometimes courage was not loud or heroic, but quiet and deliberate. It was shown in thoughtfulness, in careful consideration, and in actions that honored the trust of others. Finally, one evening, as the sky glowed with the soft colors of sunset, he spoke. His voice was steady, calm, and careful. "I do not yet know how this will work," he said, "but I understand what you are asking. I will act with care and respect, and I will do what I can to honor your trust." The elder woman smiled, her eyes reflecting both relief and quiet pride. "That is all we ask," she said. Your honesty and care are what matter most. The rest will follow naturally." The younger woman nodded, her expression softening into a small, shy smile. In that moment, a bond had formed, delicate, strong, and filled with potential. It was a connection built on trust, respect, and shared responsibility, one that would shape not only their lives but the lives of many to come. The rancher returned to his cabin that night, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear sky. He felt the weight of his choice, yet also a quiet sense of purpose. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy and that questions and challenges would come, but he also knew that he had made a step towards something greater than himself, a step into a future that held meaning beyond his solitary life. And for the first time in many years, the plains felt not just empty, but alive with possibility. The weeks that followed felt different to the rancher. The once predictable rhythm of life on the plains had taken on a new meaning. Each sunrise and sunset seemed to carry a message, reminding him of the trust the Apache women had placed in him. It was a responsibility unlike any he had faced before, one that demanded thoughtfulness, courage, and patience. Yet, despite the weight of it, he began to feel a quiet sense of purpose that stirred something deep within him. The elder woman continued to visit daily, offering guidance and insight. She spoke about the importance of intention, honesty, and respect in every decision. "A man's strength is not in his actions alone," she said one afternoon, "but in his understanding of responsibility. What you do now will touch lives beyond what you can see." Her words weighed heavily on him, but they also provided clarity. He began to see that the request was not just about a child, but about the trust and values he carried. The younger woman stayed close as well, though she rarely spoke of the request directly. Instead, she offered small acts of care, helping with chores, bringing water from the distant creek, and assisting with repairs around the cabin. Each gesture, though simple, made the rancher aware of the bond forming between them. Her quiet presence was a reminder that this was not a demand or a test, but a shared understanding. Trust, he realized, could grow in silence as much as in words. One morning, the rancher rose before dawn to check the cattle. The land was covered in a thin mist, and the air was crisp with the promise of a new day. He rode slowly along the pasture, noticing the subtle changes in the grass, the water, and the tracks of animals that had passed through the night. In that stillness, he reflected on the choices before him. The request from the women was unlike anything he had ever faced. It required courage, not through action alone, but through commitment, honesty, and the willingness to honor trust even when the path was uncertain. He realized that the decision was not solely his own. It would affect the lives of the women, their community, and the child who might come. The thought both frightened and humbled him. He had always lived quietly, avoiding conflict and focusing on the work at hand. But this situation demanded more. It demanded wisdom, patience, and a heart willing to shoulder responsibility. Later that day, the elder woman arrived with a small gift, a carefully woven basket filled with dried herbs, seeds, and a few small tools for the land. "These are for you," she said, placing the basket gently on the table. Not as payment, but as a symbol. "You have chosen to think carefully, and in that care lies your strength. The future depends on thoughtful actions, not haste." The rancher accepted the basket with quiet gratitude. He had never received gifts for doing what he thought was right. He understood the gesture not as reward, but as recognition of his character, a character that had been tested, though not in ways he had expected. The weight of the moment was profound. It reminded him that responsibility carried both challenge and meaning, and that the choices he made now would echo far beyond his immediate life. Over the next few days, conversations grew deeper. The elder woman shared stories of past hardships, of families who had endured drought, illness, and loss. She spoke of children who had grown strong not because of wealth, but because of love, guidance, and community. The younger woman, more quietly, shared her hopes for a future in which the land could sustain them and their people, where children could grow without fear, and where trust between communities could flourish. The rancher listened intently, absorbing each story with care. He realized that this request was not merely a personal matter, it was about the continuation of values, traditions, and life itself. It required thoughtfulness, not just action. It required respect, not just presence. He began to understand that by accepting, he would not only honor the women's request, but also contribute to a future greater than himself. One evening, as the sky turned golden with the setting sun, the rancher finally spoke. He called the women to the porch, where the wind carried the scent of dry grass and distant flowers. His voice was quiet, measured, and steady. "I have thought carefully about what you asked," he said. "I understand the responsibility, and I wish to honor your trust. I will do what I can, and I will do it with respect, honesty, and care. I do not know all the answers, but I will act with what I believe is right." The elder woman's eyes softened, and a faint smile appeared on her lips. "That is all we ask," she said. "Your heart and honesty are what matter most. The rest will follow naturally as it should." The younger woman, standing slightly behind, looked at him with a mixture of relief and quiet appreciation. Her shyness had not diminished, but in her gaze was trust, a bond forming that was deeper than words could express. The rancher realized that this moment was not the end of the decision, but the beginning of a shared journey, one that would require patience, care, and mutual respect. In the following weeks, preparations began in subtle ways. The women taught the rancher small customs and practices that would guide him in his new role. They explained how children were cherished, how life was protected, and how responsibility was not simply a matter of biology, but of care and guidance. The rancher listened, learning not through books or instruction, but through stories, observation, and shared experience. The younger woman often accompanied him to check the cattle, bringing herbs or food for the animals. Her presence was quiet but steady, a reminder that trust grew through shared tasks and understanding. The elder woman, observing from a distance, offered guidance when needed, but allowed the interactions to unfold naturally. It was a careful balance of teaching, trust, and patience. Through all of this, the rancher began to change. His shyness remained, but it softened into a thoughtful courage. He learned that strength was not always measured by action alone, but by the willingness to act with care and integrity when it mattered most. He began to see that the future he had once imagined, solitary and predictable, was expanding into something larger, richer, and more meaningful. One evening, after a long day of work repairing fences and checking water troughs, the rancher sat outside with the women, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The plain stretched endlessly before them, a mixture of light and shadow, promise and challenge. The elder woman spoke quietly. "The land and the people are connected. What you do affects both. Remember this always." The younger woman smiled softly, her presence a comforting reminder of shared trust. Though words were few, their meaning was clear. Life was about care, responsibility, and the bonds formed between those who respected one another. The rancher felt a sense of calm he had never known. He understood that this was not merely a duty, it was an opportunity to shape lives, to honor trust, and to act with integrity in a world that often demanded haste and shortcuts. As night fell and stars appeared overhead, the rancher realized that his decision had already begun to change him. He was no longer simply a solitary man on the plains, bound only by work and routine. He was part of something larger, a living connection between people, trust, and responsibility. And though the journey ahead would be challenging, he felt ready to face it, not with fear, but with care, honesty, and the quiet courage that had guided him all along. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility not as a burden, but as a purpose. And in that understanding, the rancher found a sense of peace, knowing that he had chosen carefully, honestly, and with respect. The plains, once vast and empty, now felt alive with possibility, carrying the promise of a future shaped not by solitude, but by trust, care, and shared humanity. The plains were quiet that morning, with the soft hum of wind through the grass and the faint sound of cattle moving in the distance. The rancher had risen early, as always, but his mind was calm in a way it had not been before. The weeks and months of reflection, discussion, and preparation had brought him to a new understanding. He now recognized that the choice he had made was more than a moment. It was a commitment that carried the weight of trust, hope, and the future. The Apache women arrived at his cabin mid-morning. There was a sense of anticipation in their steps, though it was quiet, gentle, and respectful. The elder woman's face was composed, her eyes reflecting both care and reassurance. The younger woman carried a small bundle of herbs and cloth, the same careful attention to detail she had shown from the beginning. As she approached, the rancher felt the gravity of the moment settle in his chest. This was the point where words alone would not suffice. Trust and action would define everything that came next. The elder woman spoke first, her voice calm and steady. "We have watched your care, your honesty, and your thoughtfulness. You have chosen not lightly, but with respect. That is rare, and it matters more than you know." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Today, the next step begins. It is a step not just for you or for us, but for life that will grow from trust, guidance, and care." The rancher nodded, swallowing the nervousness that had surfaced despite his careful preparation. He had never been asked to participate in something so important, so sacred. Yet he had learned that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the willingness to act despite it. He could see now that this was not about obligation or control, but about care, respect, and the continuation of life and values. The younger woman remained slightly behind, her eyes meeting his for only a moment before looking away. Her expression was a mixture of relief, trust, and something he could not quite name. He realized that this journey was as much about mutual respect and understanding as it was about responsibility. Every small gesture, every careful action had strengthened a bond that now felt unbreakable. Over the next few weeks, the women remained close, guiding him through the practices, traditions, and customs that would ensure the child would be welcomed fully into their community. The rancher approached every task with care, learning not through instruction alone, but through observation, shared labor, and quiet reflection. The elder woman explained that the child would be part of a larger story, a bridge between the past and future, between people and the land. The younger woman helped him with simple daily chores, bringing water, preparing small meals, and occasionally offering a gentle word of encouragement. Though shy, her presence had become a source of comfort for the rancher. He had come to understand that trust was built not in grand gestures, but in countless small, thoughtful actions. Each day they spent together strengthened his confidence and solidified the bond that had formed. One evening, after a long day of work repairing fences and checking water troughs, the rancher and the women sat outside together. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the plains and painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. The land seemed to hold its breath, as if witnessing the quiet significance of the moment. The elder woman spoke softly, her voice blending with the wind. "This land, these people, the child who will come, They are connected. Your care will shape all of it." The rancher listened, his heart full. He understood now that the request he had received months ago was never meant to be simple. It was a test of character, patience, and integrity. Yet it was also an opportunity, a chance to be part of something larger than himself, something enduring and meaningful. He realized that life, even in solitude, could hold purpose beyond immediate work or routine. His choice would leave a lasting impact, carried forward by trust, care, and love. Weeks passed, and finally, the day came when the child was born. It was a quiet birth, surrounded only by the women who had guided him through this journey and the careful preparation that had made it possible. The rancher was present, not as an owner, not as a master, but as a guardian of trust and respect. He held the child gently, feeling the weight of life in his hands, and understood that the child's future was intertwined with the choices he had made. The elder woman smiled, her eyes reflecting pride and gratitude. "You have done more than you know," she said softly. "This child will grow strong, guided by care, respect, and the values you have honored." The younger woman nodded, her gaze softening as she looked at the child. In that moment, the rancher felt a deep connection not just to the child, but to the community that had entrusted him with this responsibility. Life continued, but it was no longer the same. The rancher's days were still filled with work, with caring for the land and the cattle, but they were also filled with small moments of shared life. He would watch the child grow, learning from the women, observing their traditions, and understanding the depth of trust that had been placed in him. He realized that his quiet, solitary life had transformed into one of meaning, connection, and purpose. The community, too, noticed the change. Though the rancher remained shy and reserved, his actions spoke volumes. The respect he had shown, the care he had given, and the integrity he had maintained became part of the stories told by the Apache people. Children grew up hearing of the man who had acted with honesty, patience, and respect, a man whose quiet courage had shaped lives without seeking recognition. Years later, the child grew strong, guided by the traditions and values of the community, with the rancher always nearby as a steady, quiet presence. The bond formed in those early weeks and months endured, a testament to trust, care, and the power of thoughtful action. The rancher understood that true courage was not measured in loud deeds or fame, but in the willingness to honor responsibility, protect life, and act with integrity, even when the choice was difficult. The plains, once vast and empty, now felt alive with meaning. Each sunrise and sunset reminded the rancher of the quiet journey that had transformed his life. He had acted with care and respect, honored the trust of others, and helped ensure the continuation of life and values that mattered. And in that knowledge, he found a profound sense of peace. In the years that followed, the rancher remained on his land, continuing his work, tending the cattle, and caring for the land. Yet he was no longer alone in spirit. He had been part of something greater, a connection that would shape generations. The Apache women and the child were part of that story, a living reminder that kindness, trust, and responsibility could ripple outward in ways that no one could predict. And as the sun set each evening over the plains, painting the sky with the colors of life, the rancher would watch quietly from the porch of his cabin. He would see the child playing, hear the laughter of the women, and feel the quiet satisfaction of a life lived with care, honesty, and respect. The journey had been difficult, uncertain, and filled with hesitation, but in the end, it had led to something enduring, meaningful, and true, a testament to the power of trust, courage, and quiet integrity. The story of the rancher and the Apache women became part of the land itself. It was carried in the wind, in the rustling grass, in the quiet moments of sunrise and sunset. It was a story not of grandeur, wealth, or fame, but of character, patience, and the choices that shape lives. And though the rancher never sought recognition, the impact of his decision endured, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. In the end, the shy rancher who had once been speechless found his voice, not in words, but in actions, care, and the steady, quiet courage that had guided him through one of the most important journeys of his life. And through that journey, he discovered that even the quietest heart could leave a mark on the world, a mark that would endure far beyond the reaches of time, wind, and plains.